I never thought I'd be the kind of mother who would deliberately sabotage her own son's financial future. But then again, I never imagined my daughter-in-law would banish me to eat dinner alone in the kitchen while they entertained guests in my own dining room, the very home they now lived in because of my generosity. That moment, watching them laugh through the doorway while I sat at the cold metal table by the refrigerator, something inside me finally broke. After 40 years in banking, I knew exactly what one phone call could do. And I made it. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Harriet Ambersham. I spent 42 years working at First National Bank, rising from teller to senior loan officer before I retired 3 years ago. Banking was never just a job for me. It was a calling. I understood money, how it flowed, how it grew, and most importantly, how the entire financial system connected people's dreams to the cold reality of numbers on a page. What I failed to understand, until it was almost too late, was my own son. Gregory had always been headstrong. As a boy, he'd throw tantrums when he couldn't get his way, stomping his feet and holding his breath until his face turned crimson. I always thought he'd outgrow it. My husband Thomas would say, "Harriet, you're too soft on him. One day, that temper will cost him." But Thomas passed away 7 years ago from a heart attack, leaving me to navigate our family alone. I thought I was doing fine until Melissa entered the picture. The first time Gregory brought Melissa home, she arrived with a designer handbag that I recognized from the bank. It was the same model our wealthiest clients carried. Her nails were perfectly manicured, her clothes immaculate. She had a way of looking at things: my modest living room furniture, the family photos on the mantel, my garden-worn hands, with a slight wrinkle of her nose, as if catching the faint scent of something unpleasant. "Your home is so quaint," she said, the word dripping with hidden meaning. I can see where Gregory gets his humble sensibilities. Gregory beamed at this, completely missing the undertone. I saw it clearly, but I smiled and thanked her anyway. After raising a child alone, you learn to pick your battles. They married 6 months later in a ceremony that cost more than Thomas and I had paid for our first house. Gregory asked me to help with the payments, presenting it as an investment in their future together. I agreed, transferring a significant portion of my retirement savings to cover the expenses. I told myself it was what mothers do. After the wedding, they bought a house. It was far beyond what they could afford, a sprawling 4-bedroom in Oakwood Heights, the most exclusive neighborhood in our city. The mortgage was astronomical. I remember sitting at their kitchen island as Gregory slid the paperwork across to me. "Mom, we just need a cosigner. The loan officer says it's just a formality with my income," he explained, pushing a pen toward my hand. "Gregory, this payment is nearly 60% of your monthly take-home," I warned, my banking instincts flaring. "That's not sustainable." Melissa placed her hand on mine, her grip slightly too firm. "Harriet, property in Oakwood only appreciates. It's practically an investment, and we need the space for when we have children." The mention of grandchildren, that was my weakness, and they knew it. I signed. For a while, things seemed fine. I visited on Sundays for dinner, brought small gifts when I came, helped with their garden. I kept my concerns to myself when I noticed the new furniture, the luxury car Melissa began driving, the exclusive gym membership. These were their choices, not mine. Then Gregory lost his job. The tech company he worked for underwent a major restructuring, and his entire department was eliminated. He called me in tears. "Mom, I don't know what we're going to do. The severance isn't enough. The mortgage—" "Come stay with me," I offered immediately. "My house is paid off. You can save money while you look for something new." There was a pause, then Melissa's voice in the background. Gregory cleared his throat. "Actually, Mom, we were thinking you could come stay with us. The house is bigger and, well, we can't afford to move out, but maybe if you sold your place and moved in. That should have been my first warning, but I agreed. I put my modest 3-bedroom ranch, the home where I'd raised Gregory, where Thomas and I had built our life, on the market. It sold within a week, and I used half the money to pay off a significant chunk of their mortgage, reducing their monthly payments to something manageable even on Gregory's unemployment benefits. The rest I kept in savings, for emergencies. I told them, though I was already planning to use it for my grandchildren's education someday. The dynamic shifted immediately once I moved in. My boxes were relegated to the smallest bedroom at the end of the hall. Just temporarily, Melissa assured me, though she'd already converted the room's closet to seasonal storage for her extensive wardrobe. Gregory was distracted, spending hours applying for jobs but also long stretches playing video games to manage the stress, as he put it. Melissa established house rules with the confidence of someone who had never been challenged. "We're a shoe-free home now, Harriet," she informed me the first day. "And we try to keep kitchen use to scheduled hours to save on electricity. I've written them down for you." I found myself tiptoeing through my daily routine, hyper-aware of disturbing their space that my money had secured. But I reminded myself that families support each other through hard times. This arrangement was temporary, except Gregory's unemployment stretched into its 3rd month, then its 6th. The interviews he went on never materialized into offers. "They're looking for younger candidates," he complained. "No one wants to hire someone with 20 years of experience anymore." Meanwhile, Melissa continued her lifestyle unchanged. She still went to her spin classes, still met friends for lunch, still ordered delivery 3 times a week. I began to notice that bills were going unpaid, little things at first. The gardener stopped coming. The pool service left a notice. Then larger concerns. An overdue notice from the utility company tucked hastily into a drawer, a collection call that Melissa answered and quickly ended. "Is everything all right with the finances?" I asked Gregory one evening as we sat on the back patio. Melissa was out with friends. He waved his hand dismissively. "Just a mix-up with the billing, it's handled." But I knew the signs. I'd counseled too many clients through financial hardship not to recognize the patterns of avoidance, the quiet panic of watching resources dwindle while maintaining appearances. I checked my own accounts that night and realized my emergency fund had diminished significantly. There had been transfers, small at first, then larger, to their joint account. Transfers I hadn't authorized. When I confronted Gregory, he broke down. "We're underwater, Mom. The mortgage is killing us. Melissa doesn't know how bad it is. I've been trying to shield her." "Gregory, you need to be honest with her, and with me. Using my account without permission is... I'm going to pay it." "Back," he interrupted, his face flushing with that familiar childhood indignation. "As soon as I find work, I just need to keep things together until then. Melissa?" She wouldn't understand. I looked at my son, my adult son, and saw a frightened little boy playing at being a man. And I made a decision I would later regret. I agreed to help, one last time. "Let me see all the financials," I said. "Everything. We'll create a budget, a payment plan." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. But Gregory, this is the final time. He agreed eagerly, promised to gather everything. But the next day, Melissa announced they were hosting a dinner party for her friends from the country club. When I expressed concern about the expense, she laughed. "Harriet, we're not going to live like paupers just because of a temporary setback. Appearances matter in Gregory's industry. Connections get you jobs, not penny pinching." The night of the dinner party, I spent hours helping prepare an elaborate meal, expensive cuts of meat, fine wine, imported cheese, all while I knew they were missing mortgage payments. As guests began to arrive, Melissa pulled me aside. "Harriet, would you mind terribly eating in the kitchen tonight? We're one chair short." In the dining room. And these are really important contacts for Gregory. I stood there stunned as she pressed a plate into my hands and guided me toward the kitchen doorway. Through the pass-through, I could see the formal dining table, my own mahogany table that had come from my house, set elegantly for 8. There was not a chair missing. There was simply no place set for me. "It's just for tonight," Melissa whispered, already turning away. "You understand." And so I sat at the small metal table where they usually placed grocery bags, next to the humming refrigerator I had paid to repair last month, eating the meal I had helped prepare in the house my money had saved, listening to the laughter from the other room. Something inside me, something that had been bending and stretching to accommodate them, finally snapped. I finished my meal methodically, washed the dish, and retreated to my room. But I didn't cry. Instead, I opened my laptop and began to rebuild the financial knowledge I had let lapse in retirement. I looked up property records, loan documents, credit reports. I called old colleagues who still worked in banking. By morning, I had a complete picture of Gregory and Melissa's financial situation, and it was far worse than even I had suspected. The mortgage was 3 months delinquent. Credit cards were maxed out. There was a personal loan from a high-interest lender, and most disturbing of all, there was a second mortgage taken out against the house, using a power of attorney document, with my forged signature. I sat in the quiet dawn, watching the sunrise through my small bedroom window, and made a decision. Family meant everything to me. It always had. But what Gregory and Melissa were doing wasn't family. It was exploitation. And after 40 years in banking, I knew exactly how fragile their financial house of cards truly was. All it would take was one phone call. The following week passed in strange normalcy. I continued to help around the house, continued to listen to Gregory's excuses about the job market. I even sat through another dinner in the kitchen, this time not even bothering to ask why. But on Friday morning, while they were both out, I made the call. "Hello, this is Harriet Ambersham. I need to report a case of mortgage fraud." I spoke to a former colleague at the mortgage company detailing everything: the forged power of attorney, the unauthorized second mortgage, the misrepresentations on loan applications. I provided documentation, dates, account numbers. I was meticulously thorough, just as I had been throughout my banking career. "Harriet, this is serious," my colleague warned. "This will trigger an investigation. Your son could face criminal charges." "I understand," I replied, my voice steadier than I expected. "But there are consequences to financial fraud. I learned that over 4 decades of banking, and it's time my son learned it too." After I hung up, I called a real estate attorney and explained my situation. I needed to protect what remained of my assets, to establish that I was a victim of identity theft, not a willing participant in their schemes. The attorney was confident we could build a case, especially with my banking background and clean financial history. That evening, as we sat at dinner, all 3 of us at the table for once, my phone rang. I answered it on speaker, knowing exactly who it would be. "Mrs. Ambersham, this is Charles Wilson from Evergreen Mortgage. I'm calling regarding some irregularities with the loan on the property at 427 Oakwood Lane. We'll need you and the other borrowers to come into our office on Monday morning to discuss this matter. It's quite urgent." I thanked him calmly and ended the call. When I looked up, Gregory's face had drained of color. Melissa looked between us, confusion giving way to suspicion. "What irregularities?" she demanded. "Gregory, what is he talking about?" Gregory couldn't speak. He stared at me, recognition dawning in his eyes. "Mom," he whispered, "what did you do?" "Nothing," I said, placing my napkin beside my plate and standing. "I simply made a phone call. The real question is, What did you do, Gregory? What did you and Melissa do with my name, my credit, and my trust? The facade cracked instantly. Melissa turned on Gregory, screaming about how he had promised everything was handled. Gregory yelled back that she was the one spending money they didn't have, refusing to cut back, driving them further into debt. They hurled accusations at each other while I quietly began packing my belongings. By midnight, I had reserved an extended stay hotel room and called a car service. I left a note on the kitchen table, that same metal table where I'd been relegated to eat alone. Gregory and Melissa, I've contacted an attorney to represent me in this matter. I will cooperate fully with the mortgage fraud investigation. Any funds that can be recovered from the unauthorized use of my accounts will be. I suggest you both seek legal counsel immediately. Mom. The following weeks were a whirlwind of legal meetings, financial disclosures, and difficult decisions. The mortgage company pursued the fraud case aggressively. Gregory faced serious consequences, not jail time ultimately, but significant financial penalties and a settlement agreement that would follow him for years. Melissa filed for divorce before the case was even resolved, unwilling to be tied to the financial fallout. The house went into foreclosure. I had my name removed from all associated debt through the identity theft claims. My attorney helped me recover a portion of the funds that had been taken from my accounts, though much was simply gone, spent on maintaining an illusion of wealth that had never been real. I found a small apartment in a modest retirement community. It wasn't what I had planned for my later years, but it was mine, free from manipulation and disrespect. I planted window boxes with herbs and flowers, joined a book club, and slowly rebuilt my sense of security. 3 months after everything fell apart, I received a letter from Gregory. He was living in a studio apartment, working at an entry-level position far below his previous career level. The letter was filled with apologies, explanations, and pleas for reconciliation. "I never meant for it to go this far," he wrote. "I just wanted to give Melissa the life she wanted. I was afraid of losing her, but in trying to keep her, I lost you. And she left anyway. Mom, I'm so sorry." I read the letter several times before placing it in a drawer. Forgiveness wouldn't come quickly or easily. Perhaps it would come in stages, or perhaps not at all. I didn't know yet. But I did know that the woman who had sat silently at that kitchen table, allowing herself to be pushed into the background of her own life, was gone forever. Sometimes, when I'm tending to my tiny herb garden or chatting with my new neighbors, I think about the lessons banking taught me that I hadn't fully appreciated until now. That you must read the fine print in relationships just as carefully as in contracts. That emotional debts, like financial ones, compound over time. And that sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for someone is to let them face the consequences of their actions. And sometimes, when I'm setting my small dining table for one, I smile at the memory of that cold metal kitchen table. It wasn't the insult itself that changed everything. It was the moment I finally decided I deserved better. I may not have the spacious house or the family dinners I once envisioned for my retirement, but I have something far more valuable. The quiet dignity of a life lived on my own terms, free from exploitation disguised as love. And that, I've learned, is worth more than any mortgage. I spent the next few days carefully documenting everything. As a career banker, meticulousness was second nature to me. I created spreadsheets tracking every unauthorized withdrawal from my accounts, photographed the bills I found hidden in drawers, and started recording conversations on my phone. Not necessarily for legal purposes, though that might come later, but to ground myself in reality whenever doubt crept in. Whenever that maternal instinct to excuse, to forgive, to sacrifice began to whisper that perhaps I was overreacting. The morning after I discovered the forged power of attorney document, I woke early and sat by my bedroom window, watching the sprinklers create rainbow prisms across the manicured lawn I wasn't allowed to tend anymore. Melissa had hired a service. After complaining about my amateur gardening techniques, the roses I'd transplanted from my old garden were now gone, replaced by exotic ornamentals that required constant professional attention. My phone buzzed with a calendar notification. Gregory, interview hour Caldwell Tech. His 5th interview, this month. Each time he'd return home with the same rehearsed disappointment, the same excuses. Too old, too experienced, too expensive. Never that he might have been unprepared, or that his skills might have atrophied during his increasingly lengthy unemployment. I heard movement downstairs, the coffee machine gurgling to life. It would be Melissa. Gregory never rose before. 9 these days. I slipped my phone into my robe pocket and made my way down to the kitchen. Perhaps today I could make a small overture, suggest breakfast together. Keep channels of communication open while I planned my next steps. Melissa stood at the marble island, scrolling through her phone with one perfectly manicured hand while the other clutched her coffee mug. She wore expensive athleisure wear, though I knew her Pilates class wasn't until noon. "Good morning," I offered, moving toward the coffee pot. "Beautiful day out there." She glanced up, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Morning, Harriet. I've got the plumber coming at 10 for the guest bathroom sink. Can you let him in? I have an appointment I can't miss." This was our rhythm now. No genuine conversation, just domestic logistics. I was the unpaid house manager, expected to handle contractors and deliveries while they carried on with their lives. "Of course," I said, pouring my coffee. "I'll be here all day." "Great." She set her mug in the sink rather than the dishwasher. "Oh, and we're having the Parkers over tonight. Just a casual dinner thing." My stomach tightened. The Parkers, another couple from their social circle. The husband. Worked at a firm where Gregory had interviewed twice. Another networking opportunity that would cost hundreds in food and wine they couldn't afford. "Would you like me to cook something?" I asked, already knowing the answer. Melissa waved dismissively. "No need. I'm having it catered. But could you maybe make yourself scarce during dinner? The dining room only seats 6 comfortably, and the Richardsons are coming too." There it was again. The casual exclusion, delivered as if it were the most reasonable request in the world. As if I were a tenant rather than family. As if this house, secured with my money and credit, were entirely hers to control. "Scarce," I repeated, the word bitter on my tongue. "You mean eat in the kitchen again?" She sighed, a theatrical display of patience stretched thin. "Or your room, if you prefer." I just thought, with all the networking Gregory needs to do, it would be easier without his mother hovering, I finished for her. "You said it, not me." She flashed that beauty pageant smile, already moving toward the door. "Anyway, plumber at 10, thanks a million." After she left, I stood alone in the gleaming kitchen, absently running my finger along the edge of the marble countertop. This cold, perfect kitchen that had never known the organized chaos of actual home cooking, of family meals prepared with love rather than for show. My old kitchen had been modest, laminate countertops worn smooth from years of use, cabinets that didn't quite close properly anymore. But it had been the heart of our home. Gregory had done homework at that table while I prepared dinner. Thomas and I had shared wine there after Gregory went to bed, planning our future together. Now, I was an inconvenience in a showcase home that was more stage set than sanctuary. I placed my coffee mug in the dishwasher, pointedly rinsing Melissa's and adding it as well, and retreated to my room. There, I opened my laptop and continued my investigation into their finances. Using my banking experience and the passwords I'd borrowed from Gregory's carelessly unlocked phone, I pieced together the full extent of their financial deception. The numbers were staggering. They were nearly $780,000 in debt, the mortgage, the fraudulent second mortgage, credit cards, personal loans, and a line of credit secured against Gregory's retirement account. Almost all of it had accumulated in the past 18 months, coinciding with their marriage and house purchase. They were making minimum payments on some accounts, missing payments on others, and robbing Peter to pay Paul in a desperate financial shell game. And then there was my money. Nearly $210,000 siphoned from my accounts through what appeared to be a systematic campaign of small, regular transfers designed to fly under my radar, plus the larger sums I'd willingly provided for their wedding and to reduce their mortgage. In total, they had consumed almost 2/3 of my life savings. I leaned back in my chair, a strange calm settling over me. This wasn't just mismanagement or entitlement. This was calculated financial abuse. And I, with 4 decades of banking experience, had fallen victim to it because I'd allowed my maternal blindness to override my professional judgment. The plumber came and went. I made a light lunch that I ate alone at the kitchen island, standing because Melissa had replaced the comfortable breakfast stools with trendy acrylic ones that hurt my back. I was washing my plate when I heard the garage door open, followed by Gregory's heavy footsteps. "Mom, you home?" His voice carried that forced cheerfulness that had become his default with me, a tone that suggested we were characters in a 1950s sitcom rather than an actual mother and son navigating a complex relationship. "In the kitchen," I called back, drying my hands on a towel. He appeared in the doorway, his interview suit already disheveled, tie loosened. Before he even spoke, I knew. "No luck?" I asked gently. He slumped against the doorframe. "They went with an internal candidate, said I was overqualified anyway." The familiar script. I nodded sympathetically, though privately I wondered if there had even been an interview at all. Lately, I'd begun to suspect some of these interviews were covers for long lunches or afternoons at the golf course. The timing never quite aligned with the commute times, and his suits returned without the slight stiffness that dry cleaning typically left. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said. "There's cold cuts in the fridge if you want lunch." He waved off the suggestion. "Not hungry." "Melissa mentioned the Parkers are coming tonight?" "And the Richardsons, apparently." His face brightened slightly. "Good. Jake Richardson knows everyone in tech. Could be a connection there." I hesitated, then decided to test the waters. "Gregory, I've been looking at your finances." His expression shifted immediately, defensiveness rising like a shield. "What do you mean, looking at my finances? Have you been snooping through our things?" "I've been reviewing the accounts I have access to," I corrected calmly, "including my own, which seemed to have quite a few unauthorized withdrawals." He paled slightly but recovered quickly. "Mom, I told you about the transfers. It's temporary, just helping with cash flow until I land something. You said you were okay with helping." I was okay with the larger transfers we discussed. Not the dozens of smaller ones happening almost daily, and I certainly never agreed to be a co-signer on a second mortgage. Now he looked genuinely alarmed. "What are you talking about?" Either he was an exceptional actor or Melissa had taken some actions without his knowledge. I decided to press further. "There's a second mortgage on this house, Gregory, for $320,000, with my name on it." He shook his head vehemently. That's not possible. We didn't take out a second mortgage. You must be mistaken." I retrieved my laptop from my room and returned to show him the documentation I'd found. As he scrolled through the loan details, his hands began to shake. "I didn't do this," he whispered. "I swear, Mom, I had no idea." For the first time in months, I believed him. The shock in his eyes seemed genuine, but that only raised more troubling questions. "If you didn't do it, then Melissa did," I said quietly, using both our names. Gregory ran a hand through. His hair, his breathing shallow. "There must be some mistake. Melissa wouldn't, she couldn't." The money went somewhere, Gregory. $320,000 doesn't just vanish. He stood abruptly, nearly knocking over the bar stool. I need to talk to her. This is crazy. There's got to be an explanation. I caught his arm before he could storm out. Wait. Think this through. If she did this without telling you, confronting her directly might not be the best approach. We need to understand the full picture first. He hesitated, years of financial recklessness warring with the gravity of this new discovery. Finally, he nodded, sinking back onto the stool. What do we do? First, we find out where the money went, I said, slipping back into the professional demeanor that had served me well through countless financial crises at the bank. Then we determine if this was an isolated incident or part of a pattern. We spent the next hour tracing the path of the funds from the second mortgage. The money had been deposited into their joint account, then quickly distributed across a bewildering array of transfers. $42,000 to a luxury car leasing company, $68,000 to various retail establishments, $29,000 to a plastic surgeon, $73,000 to an interior designer, and most concerning of all, $108,000 to an account we couldn't immediately identify. This doesn't make sense, Gregory muttered. The car, maybe. Melissa said it was a special financing deal, the shopping. She's always been a spender, but this is different. And what the hell is this last account? I was about to suggest we dig deeper when we heard the front door open, followed by the rustling of shopping bags and Melissa's voice on the phone. I'm telling you, Jen, it was the most amazing treatment. My skin hasn't looked this good in years, worth every penny. She laughed, a tinkling sound that now struck me as performative rather than genuine. Anyway, gotta run. Dinner party tonight. Yes, another one. Networking never ends. Gregory and I exchanged glances. I quietly closed my laptop as Melissa's footsteps approached the kitchen. She appeared in the doorway, laden with glossy shopping bags, her face momentarily freezing when she saw us sitting together at the island. "Oh, you're home early," she said to Gregory, quickly regaining her composure. "How was the interview?" "Didn't pan out," he replied, his voice carefully neutral. "What's in the bags?" She waved dismissively. "Just some things for tonight. Candles, new napkins, a blouse I spotted that was perfect for the occasion." She smiled brightly. "You know how important appearances are, especially with the Richardsons coming." I watched my son's face as the disconnection between their financial reality and Melissa's ongoing spending spree finally truly registered. He'd been compartmentalizing, I realized, keeping his growing anxiety about their finances separate from Melissa's lifestyle, blaming outside forces, the job market, age, discrimination, bad luck, rather than confronting the simple mathematical impossibility of their situation. "Melissa," he began slowly, "how much did all that cost?" Her smile tightened. "Seriously? You're going to nitpick my shopping right now, when you're the one who can't seem to land a job after 6 months of trying?" The speed with which she shifted to attack was impressive. Gregory immediately backpedaled, his momentary clarity already crumbling. "No, just what? Want to make me feel bad for trying to maintain connections that might actually help your career? For trying to keep things nice around here despite everything?" She dropped the bags on the counter. "I don't need this right now. I have a dinner to prepare for." "I thought it was catered," I said mildly. Melissa shot me a look of pure venom. "Partly. I still have a million things to do." She turned back to Gregory. "Are you going to help me, or just sit there interrogating me about a few shopping bags?" And just like that, the moment was lost. Gregory rose, already reaching for the bags, already slipping back into the role of appeasing husband. "Of course. Sorry. Let me help you get ready." I remained at the island, watching them leave together, Melissa already chattering about place settings and wine pairings as if the tense conversation had never happened. The ease with which she maneuvered him away from uncomfortable truths was almost admirable in its efficiency. I returned to my room to change for the evening, selecting comfortable clothes suitable for a dinner eaten in solitude. As I was buttoning my cardigan, my phone rang, an unknown number with our area code. "Hello?" I answered cautiously. "Mrs. Ambersham? This is Diane Porter from First Citizens Bank. I'm calling regarding some unusual activity on your accounts." My pulse quickened. What kind of unusual activity? "There appears to be an attempt to initiate a wire transfer of $175,000 from your savings to an external account. The request was made online about 20 minutes ago. Given the size of the transfer and the fact that it's going to an account you've never transferred to before, our fraud department flagged it for verification." The room seemed to tilt slightly. "I didn't authorize any transfer," I said firmly. "Please block it immediately." "Already done, Mrs. Ambersham. We've also placed a temporary freeze on your accounts for security. You'll need to come into a branch with identification to lift the freeze and review recent activity." "I'll be there first thing tomorrow," I promised. "Thank you for catching this." After ending the call, I sat motionless on the edge of my bed, piecing together what had just happened. Someone had attempted to drain what remained of my savings. Someone with my online banking credentials. Someone who knew I'd been investigating their financial activities and needed to act quickly before I discovered more. The timing wasn't coincidental. After our conversation, either Gregory or Melissa or both had tried to take what was left of my money before I could protect it. The dinner party, the shopping bags, the catering, all of it was misdirection, a smokescreen to keep me occupied, while they executed their financial endgame. I felt a strange calm settle over me. No more confusion, no more benefit of the doubt. The path forward was suddenly crystal clear. I checked the time, 4:45 p.m. The banks would be closing soon, but I knew the manager at my branch personally. I sent her a text message, explaining that I had an urgent situation and asking if she could meet me after hours. She responded immediately. "Come at 5:30. I'll wait for you." Next, I called a locksmith service and explained that I needed to change the locks on my safe deposit box immediately. They confirmed they could meet me at the bank. Finally, I called a lawyer, not a family friend or anyone Gregory might know, but a highly recommended elder law attorney whose name I'd stored away for exactly this kind of scenario. Her assistant scheduled an emergency consultation for the following morning. I packed an overnight bag with essentials: clothing, medications, toiletries, and most importantly, all my financial documents and identification. I tucked the bag under my bed, out of sight. Then I touched up my makeup, smoothed my hair, and went downstairs to join the pre-dinner preparations as if nothing had changed. The kitchen was a flurry of activity. The caterers had arrived and were setting up elegant appetizer platters while Melissa directed them with the authority of a field marshal. Gregory was opening wine bottles, his earlier distress apparently forgotten. Neither of them seemed to notice as I slipped into the room and began arranging flowers in a vase, positioning myself where I could hear their conversations. "Did you take care of that thing?" Melissa murmured to Gregory when the caterers stepped outside to retrieve more supplies. He nodded, a flicker of discomfort crossing his face. "All set. Though I'm not sure if—" "Not now," she cut him off as the caterers returned. Louder, she added, "Be a dear and make sure the guest bathroom has fresh hand towels." They were working together then. The realization should have hurt more than it did. Instead, I felt only a cool determination strengthening my resolve. As the hour of the dinner party approached, I made my move. I approached Melissa, who was arranging place cards at the dining table. 6 settings, as expected, with no place for me. "Melissa, I'm feeling a bit under the weather," I said, injecting just the right note of frailty into my voice. "I think I'll skip dinner altogether and turn in early. Please apologize to your guests for me." She barely looked up. "Oh no, Hope, it's nothing serious. Get some rest then." No concern, no offer to bring me soup or check on me later. just relief that I'd removed myself from the equation without her having to banish me explicitly. "Thank you, dear. I took a sleeping pill already, so I'll probably be out cold. Don't worry about keeping the noise down on my account." That caught her attention. Her eyes flicked to mine, calculating. "A sleeping pill? Are you having trouble sleeping lately?" "Just occasionally," I said with a small shrug. "Age, you know. The doctor prescribed them months ago. I take them rarely, but tonight seemed like a good time." She nodded, her expression softening into something that might have resembled concern if I didn't know better. "Good idea. Rest up. We'll be fine without you." I said goodnight to Gregory, who was adjusting his tie in the hallway mirror, receiving a distracted, "Feel better, Mom," in response. Then I retreated to my room, closed the door audibly, and waited. 20 minutes later, the doorbell rang. The first guests had arrived. I listened to the muffled sounds of greetings, laughter, clinking glasses. When the noise level suggested all guests had arrived and cocktail hour was in full swing, I quietly retrieved my overnight bag, opened my bedroom window, and slipped out onto the side yard. My car was parked on the street, deliberately left there earlier under the pretense of making room for the guests' vehicles. I reached it without being seen, stowed my bag in the trunk, and drove away from the house that had never really been my home. At the bank, Sharon, the manager, was waiting as promised. We'd known each other for 15 years. She'd been a teller when I was a loan officer, and we'd risen through the ranks together. "Harriet," she greeted me, her face concerned. "What's happening? This doesn't sound like you." In her office, I laid out the situation in clinical terms, bankers discussing fraud rather than a mother describing betrayal. Sharon's expression grew increasingly grave as I showed her the documentation I'd gathered. "This is elder financial abuse," she said finally. "Criminal, not just unethical. We need to act quickly." Within an hour, we had completely secured my remaining assets. New accounts were created with complex passwords and additional security protocols. The compromised accounts were frozen permanently. The locksmith changed the access codes to my safe deposit box, where I stored the original copies of my will, property deeds, and insurance policies. "What about your personal items at their house?" Sharon asked as we completed the paperwork. "Valuables, sentimental things?" I thought about my mother's pearls, the photo albums, Thomas's watch collection, things that mattered to me but wouldn't be of immediate financial value to Gregory and Melissa. "They'll have to wait," I decided. "Getting those back is phase 2. Sharon squeezed my hand. "You can stay with Ron and me tonight. Our guest room is always ready." I shook my head. "I've already booked a hotel, somewhere they wouldn't think to look, even if they notice I'm gone tonight, which I doubt." She nodded, understanding. "And tomorrow?" "Tomorrow I meet with the lawyer, then the police, and then—" I paused, looking down at the new bank cards in my hand, physical symbols of the financial firewall I'd just created between myself and my son. "Then I start rebuilding." The hotel was anonymous and comfortable, a mid-range chain on the outskirts of town. I checked in under my maiden name, took a long shower, and sat cross-legged on the bed with my phone beside me, waiting. It was nearly midnight when the first call came. Gregory, his voice tight with controlled panic. "Mom? Where are you? Are you okay?" "I'm fine," I replied calmly. "How was your dinner party?" "Forget the dinner party. We came to check on you and you weren't in your room. Your window was open. We thought—" He broke off, emotion finally cracking his voice. "We thought something had happened to you." "Something did happen to me," I said quietly. I learned the truth about my son and his wife. Silence stretched between us, taut and heavy. "What are you talking about?" he finally asked, but the defensiveness in his tone told me he already knew. "The wire transfer you tried to make from my savings account this afternoon. The second mortgage with my forged signature." the systematic emptying of my accounts over the past 6 months. I kept my voice level, factual. Did you think I wouldn't notice, Gregory? I spent 40 years tracking financial fraud. Mom, you're confused. We can explain everything. Come home and we'll talk about this. It's not my home. It never was. It was just another asset you and Melissa were trying to extract value from. I paused, then added, just like me. In the background, I could hear Melissa's voice rising in pitch, demanding to know what I was saying. Gregory muffled the phone briefly, then returned. Where are you? I'll come get you right now. You're obviously upset. No, I said firmly. I'm not coming back. Not tonight, not ever. I've secured my remaining assets. I've documented the fraud. Tomorrow I'll be speaking with both a lawyer and the police. The police? Now real fear entered his voice. Mom, you can't be serious. This is a family matter, not a criminal one. Financial elder abuse is absolutely a criminal matter, as is identity theft and fraud. Ask Melissa. I'm sure she's familiar with the statutes. More muffled conversation, then Melissa's voice suddenly came on the line, honey sweet with practiced concern. Harriet, sweetheart, we're so worried about… You haven't been yourself lately. Gregory mentioned you took a sleeping pill tonight. Maybe it's affecting your thinking. Why don't you tell us where you are, and we'll come make sure you're safe. I'm safer now than I've been since I moved in with you, I replied. And my thinking is perfectly clear. Clear enough to understand that the $108,000 transfer from the fraudulent second mortgage went to an account in your maiden name. Clear enough to have already provided that information to my banker and my attorney. The honeyed tone vanished instantly. You spied on our private financial records? You had no right? I had every right to investigate fraud committed in my name and against my accounts, I interrupted, just as I have every right to press charges. You wouldn't dare, she hissed. He's your son, your only child. Yes, I agreed, a wave of sadness finally breaking through my composed exterior. He is, which makes what you both did all the more unforgivable. I ended the call as Melissa launched into another tirade. Within minutes, my phone lit up with texts and calls from both of them, alternating between pleas, threats, and attempts at manipulation. I silenced the phone and placed it on the nightstand. Tomorrow would be challenging, the first day of a difficult journey through legal proceedings and emotional reckonings. But tonight, in this anonymous hotel room with my remaining assets secured and my path forward clear, I felt something I hadn't experienced since before Thomas died. The quiet strength of standing firmly in my own truth, unswayed by the emotional manipulations of others. I had spent my entire adult life as Gregory's mother, subordinating my needs to his, making excuses for his shortcomings, believing that maternal love could overcome his fundamental character flaws. Tomorrow, I would begin the process of rediscovering who Harriet Ambersham was beyond that all-consuming identity, who I might become in this unexpected final chapter of my life. I turned out the light and slept more soundly than I had in months. Morning arrived with the impersonal cheerfulness of hotel sunshine, filtered through heavy curtains, accompanied by the distant sounds of housekeeping carts and ice machines. For a moment, I stared at the unfamiliar ceiling, trying to orient myself. Then reality came flooding back. The fraud, the betrayal, my midnight escape. My phone showed 17 missed calls and 32 text messages. I scrolled through them without reading, noting only the escalating tone of the previews, from concern to anger to desperate bargaining. The final message, sent at 4:37 a.m., was simply, "We need to talk. Please." I silenced the phone again and prepared for the day ahead. The hotel's complimentary breakfast was adequate, weak coffee and a blueberry muffin that I ate mechanically while reviewing my notes for the meeting with the attorney. By 8:45 a.m., I was sitting in the reception area of Westlake Legal Associates, a leather portfolio containing all my documentation balanced on my knees. "Mrs. Ambersham?" A woman in her early 50s extended her hand. "I'm Catherine Westlake. Please come in." Catherine's office was unpretentious but immaculate, with law degrees from prestigious universities displayed alongside family photos and what appeared to be amateur watercolor landscapes. She gestured for me to take a seat across from her substantial oak desk. "Sharon Bennett at First Citizens speaks very highly of you," she said, settling into her chair. "She mentioned potential elder financial abuse and identity theft?" I nodded, opening my portfolio. "My son and his wife have systematically drained my accounts over the past 6 months. They've also forged my signature on a second mortgage and attempted to wire transfer the remainder of my savings yesterday afternoon." If she was shocked by my blunt assessment, she didn't show it. Instead, she took the documents I offered, scanning them with practiced efficiency. "How much have they taken in total?" she asked. "Approximately $210,000 from my accounts directly, plus the fraudulent second mortgage of $320,000 that I'm supposedly a co-signer on." She looked up sharply. "That's substantial. Are there any other family members involved? Anyone who might have benefited from these transactions?" I shook my head. "Just my son Gregory and his wife Melissa. I have no other children, and my husband passed away 7 years ago." For the next hour, I walked her through everything. The initial voluntary financial support I'd provided, the gradual escalation to unauthorized transfers, the discovery of the forged power of attorney, and finally, the attempted wire transfer that had prompted my departure. Catherine took meticulous notes, occasionally asking for clarification on specific dates or transactions. When I finished, she sat back in her chair, fingers steepled beneath her chin. "Mrs. Ambersham, you have a textbook case of elder financial abuse, complicated by identity theft and fraud. The good news, if we can call it that, is that your banking background has given you the skills to document everything thoroughly. The paper trail is clear." "What are my options?" I asked. "You have several, none of them easy." She leaned forward. "First, you can pursue civil remedies. Sue your son and daughter-in-law for the stolen funds and damages. Second, you can report this to the police as criminal fraud, which could lead to arrests and criminal charges. Third, you can pursue both paths simultaneously." I nodded, having expected as much. "And what about the house? The fraudulent second mortgage?" "That's actually simpler than you might think. Since the signature was forged, the mortgage is invalid. We'll need to file a fraud report with the mortgage company and possibly get handwriting analysis to prove the forgery, but you shouldn't be liable for that debt." "And Gregory and Melissa?" Catherine's expression softened slightly. "That depends on what you want, Mrs. Ambersham. If you pursue criminal charges, they could face significant penalties, possibly including jail time, especially for Melissa if she was the one who forged the documents. If you pursue only civil remedies, you might recover some of your money, but there would be no criminal record." I closed my eyes briefly, feeling the weight of 40 years of motherhood pressing against the banker's pragmatism that had once defined my professional life. "If I don't report this criminally," I said slowly, "what message does that send? That there are no real consequences for stealing from your own mother? That family members are acceptable targets?" Catherine nodded. "It's a difficult balance. Many of my elder abuse clients struggle with the same question. They want justice, but hesitate to be the cause of severe consequences for family members, even those who have harmed them." "What would you do?" I asked quietly. She considered this thoughtfully. "Professionally, I recommend pursuing both civil and criminal remedies. The criminal case strengthens the civil case, and frankly, what they've done is criminal. But personally, I can't answer that for you. It depends on many factors. Your relationship with your son before this incident, whether you believe this, Behavior is an anomaly or a pattern, your own capacity for forgiveness and your need for closure. Closure. The word hung in the air between us. What would closure look like in this situation? Gregory in handcuffs. A restitution check that could never replace the sense of security and trust I'd lost? Or something else entirely? I need time to think, I said finally. Of course. However, there is sometimes sensitivity here. Assets have a way of disappearing once people realize they're under scrutiny, and obtaining a temporary restraining order to prevent further financial transactions might be prudent regardless of your ultimate decision about criminal charges. By noon, we had drafted and filed emergency petitions for financial protection, effectively putting a legal freeze on any further attempts to access my assets or incur debt in my name. Catherine had also helped me draft a formal letter to the second mortgage lender, contesting the validity of the loan due to forgery. As I left her office, I felt simultaneously lighter and heavier, relieved to have concrete legal protections in place, but burdened by the decisions still ahead. I checked my watch, 12:45 p.m. My appointment at the police station wasn't until 2:30. I needed lunch, and more importantly, I needed a moment of normalcy amid the chaos my life had become. I found a small cafe a few blocks from the attorney's office, one I'd never visited before, where there was no risk of running into Gregory or Melissa or anyone from our shared social circle. I ordered soup and a sandwich, then sat at a corner table, watching the everyday tableau of strangers going about their ordinary lives, checking phones, chatting with companions, hurrying through quick lunches before returning to work. How simple their world seemed from the outside. How straightforward their concerns. Did any of them sit here nursing a coffee while contemplating whether to file criminal charges against their only child? My phone buzzed with an incoming call. Gregory again. I nearly declined it, but some lingering maternal instinct made me answer. "Mom?" he began without preamble, his voice rough as if he'd been crying or hadn't slept. "Please come home. We can fix this." "There's nothing to fix, Gregory. What's done is done." "It was Melissa," he blurted. "The second mortgage, the big transfers, that was all her. I swear I didn't know about most of it until you showed me yesterday." I closed my eyes, unsurprised by his attempt to shift blame. And the small transfers from my accounts? The ones happening almost daily for months? The wire transfer attempted yesterday after our conversation? Were those all Melissa too? Silence stretched between us. I was desperate, he finally whispered. The house, the lifestyle, it was all slipping away. I just needed to keep things afloat until I found another job. By stealing from your mother. By borrowing, he corrected quickly. I was going to pay it all back. I still will. With what money, Gregory? You've been unemployed for 6 months. You have no savings, massive debt, and a lifestyle you can't sustain. I have a lead on a position at Merrick Industries. The interview is next week. It's practically a sure thing. The familiar refrain. How many sure things had there been since he lost his job? How many promising leads that mysteriously evaporated? Even if that were true, I said carefully, it doesn't change what you've already done. Mom, please. His voice cracked. If you press charges, my life is over. My career, my reputation, everything. You should have considered that before you started systematically draining my retirement accounts. What do you want? He asked, desperation edging his words. An apology? I'm sorry. I'm more sorry than you can possibly imagine. Restitution? I'll pay back every penny, with interest. Just tell me what it will take to make this right. What would it take? The question reverberated through me. What could possibly restore the trust that had been shattered, the security that had been stolen along with my money? I don't know if this can be made right, I said finally. Some broken things can't be fixed, Gregory. Don't say that, he pleaded. We're family. Family forgives. Family. The word that had been weaponized against me repeatedly throughout this ordeal. Family accepts being excluded at dinner parties. Family doesn't complain about being relegated to eat alone in the kitchen. Family forgives financial exploitation. I need to go, I said, suddenly weary of the conversation. Wait, where are you staying? At least tell me that. I've been worried sick. I'm safe. That's all you need to know. Are you... He hesitated. Are you really going to the police? I glanced at my watch. My appointment at the station was in just over an hour. Goodbye, Gregory, I said, and ended the call. I paid for my barely touched lunch and sat in my car for several minutes, breathing deeply, trying to center myself. The parking garage was cool and dim, a liminal space between decisions. I could drive to the police station as planned, or I could cancel the appointment, pursue only civil remedies, try to find some middle path that wouldn't permanently sever my relationship with my only child. The dashboard clock ticked forward. 1:17 p.m. I needed to decide. My phone rang again. Melissa this time. I declined the call immediately. A text message followed. If you go to the police, you'll never see Gregory again. Is that what you want? To die alone? The naked threat, the casual cruelty of invoking my mortality as leverage, something crystallized within me, hardening my resolve. I started the car and drove toward the police station. Detective Rivera was younger than I'd expected, perhaps in his late 30s, with alert eyes and a carefully neutral expression that reminded me of my own professional banking face, the one I'd worn while listening to countless explanations for overdrafts, missed payments, and suspicious transactions. Mrs. Ambersham? He said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. Thank you for coming in. I understand from Officer Jimenez that you're here to report financial exploitation? I nodded, opening my portfolio yet again. My son and daughter-in-law have stolen approximately $210,000 from my accounts over the past 6 months. They've also forged my signature on a second mortgage worth $320,000. If he was surprised by my directness, he didn't show it. He simply nodded and began taking notes. I'll need to ask you some difficult questions, he warned. This type of investigation can be particularly challenging when family members are involved. I understand, I said. I'm prepared. For the next 2 hours, I recounted the entire situation yet again, providing bank statements, screenshots, copies of the forged documents, and a timeline of events. Detective Rivera listened attentively, asking detailed questions about specific transactions and occasionally consulting with a financial crimes specialist who joined us midway through the interview. This is one of the more thoroughly documented cases of elder financial abuse I've seen, the specialist commented, reviewing my spreadsheets. Most victims don't have your background in banking, Mrs. Ambersham. Small comfort, I replied dryly. Detective Rivera leaned forward, his expression serious. Mrs. Ambersham, based on what you've shared, we have sufficient evidence to open a formal investigation. This could lead to criminal charges against both your son and daughter-in-law. I want to be completely transparent about what that means. He explained the process. The investigation would likely take weeks, possibly months. There would be interviews with bank personnel, forensic financial analysis, and eventually, questioning of Gregory and Melissa. If charges were filed, there would be arraignments, preliminary hearings, and possibly a trial unless plea agreements were reached. Throughout this process, your participation will be essential, he emphasized. You would need to provide testimony, potentially multiple times. It can be emotionally draining, especially when the defendants are family members. I understand, I said again, though the full weight of what lay ahead was beginning to settle on my shoulders. Many victims in your situation start this process, but don't follow through, he added gently. They feel conflicted, especially as the reality of seeing their family members face criminal penalties becomes more concrete. I'm not trying to discourage you. What's happened to you is wrong and deserves justice. I just want you to be fully informed about the road ahead. I appreciated his candor. This wouldn't be as simple as filing a report and walking away. This would be a commitment to a lengthy, painful process that would permanently alter my relationship with Gregory. What happens next? I asked. We'll open an investigation based on your report today. We'll need formal statements from the bank personnel involved, and we'll begin the process of obtaining warrants for your son and daughter-in-law's financial records. In cases like this, we often find that there are additional victims or additional financial improprieties beyond what was initially reported. Additional victims. The thought hadn't occurred to me. Was I simply the latest target in a pattern of financial manipulation? The idea made me feel simultaneously less foolish and more violated. How long do I have to decide whether to proceed? I asked. Detective Rivera's expression softened slightly. The investigation will move forward based on today's report, but if at any point you decide you don't want to pursue criminal charges, you can let us know. However, once certain thresholds are crossed in financial crimes cases, the district attorney may choose to proceed even without victim cooperation, especially in elder abuse cases. I nodded, understanding the implication. The machinery of justice, once set in motion, developed its own momentum. By the time I left the police station, dusk was settling over the city. I sat in my car, watching the streetlights flicker on one by one, illuminating the growing darkness. My phone showed more missed calls and messages, but I couldn't bring myself to check them. Instead, I drove back to the hotel, ordered room service, and sat by the window looking out at the anonymous landscape of suburban rooftops and distant highway lights. Sleep eluded me that night. I lay awake replaying moments from Gregory's childhood. His first steps across our living room floor, his graduation day, the proud smile when he got his first job offer. Had there been signs even then of the man he would become? Had I missed opportunities to instill different values, to teach him that love wasn't measured in material possessions or the appearance of success? Around 3 a.m., I gave up on sleep and opened my laptop. I navigated to a local real estate website and began browsing apartments for rent. If I was truly committed to this new chapter of my life, I needed a permanent place to live, not an extended stay hotel. I narrowed my search to small one-bedroom units in modest buildings, places where my reduced financial circumstances would be sustainable. After an hour of searching, I had scheduled viewings for 3 apartments, all for the following afternoon. Shortly after dawn, I received a text from Catherine, my attorney. Meeting with second mortgage lender confirmed for 10 a.m. Can you make it? I confirmed I would be there, then showered and dressed with particular care, selecting a tailored blazer and slacks that had once been my banking uniform. Today I needed to project competence and authority, not the vulnerability of a victimized mother. The offices of Westland Mortgage Corporation occupied 3 floors of a glass and steel building downtown. Catherine met me in the lobby, professional in a charcoal suit, a leather briefcase at her side. "Ready?" she asked, her expression reassuring. "As I'll ever be," I replied. We were escorted to a conference room where 3 people awaited us. Daniel Wilson, VP of Loan Operations, Teresa Alvarez, Chief Compliance Officer, and a man introduced only as Mr. Reed from Legal. Catherine opened the meeting with surgical precision. "We're here to address the fraudulent second mortgage taken out against Mrs. Ambersham's property at 427 Oakwood Lane. We have documentation proving that Mrs. Ambersham's signature was forged on all loan documents, and that the purported power of attorney used to secure this loan was also fraudulent." Mr. Wilson shifted uncomfortably. "These are serious allegations. Our verification procedures are quite stringent." "And yet," Catherine countered, sliding a folder across the table, They failed spectacularly in this case. This includes Mrs. Ambersham's genuine signature from multiple verified documents, alongside the forged signatures from your loan paperwork. Even a layperson can see the discrepancies. Ms. Alvarez examined the documents, her frown deepening. There appear to be inconsistencies, she admitted. More than inconsistencies, Catherine pressed. Outright fraud. Mrs. Ambersham never applied for this loan, never signed these documents, never received the proceeds, and never authorized anyone to act on her behalf. Mr. Reed cleared his throat. If what you're alleging is true, this would, of course, invalidate the loan. However, the funds have already been disbursed. The situation isn't as simple as simply canceling the mortgage. The situation is exactly that simple from Mrs. Ambersham's perspective, Catherine responded. She bears no responsibility for funds disbursed based on forged documentation. That's a matter between your institution and the perpetrators of the fraud. The discussion continued for nearly 2 hours, growing increasingly technical as we delved into the specifics of the loan application, the verification procedures that had failed, and the legal ramifications for all parties. Throughout, I observed with a banker's eye, noting which points made the mortgage executives most uncomfortable, which arguments resonated. Finally, Ms. Alvarez turned to me directly. Mrs. Ambersham, just to clarify, you're alleging that your son and daughter-in-law executed this fraud without your knowledge or consent? That's correct, I said steadily. And you've reported this to the police? Yes, an investigation is underway. She exchanged glances with her colleagues. We would of course cooperate fully with any law enforcement inquiry. In the meantime, we'll need to conduct our own internal investigation into how this occurred. Mr. Wilson leaned forward. Mrs. Ambersham, given your banking background, you understand that unwinding a transaction of this magnitude isn't instantaneous. While we investigate, the loan remains active in our system, which means, Catherine interjected, that Mrs. Ambersham's name remains associated with a debt she never incurred. This is causing her ongoing harm. More discussion followed, culminating in a compromise. Westland would place the loan in a special administrative status while investigating the fraud allegations. No adverse credit reporting would occur, and no collection activities would be pursued against me. In exchange, we would provide copies of all police reports and investigation findings as they became available. As we left the building, Catherine seemed satisfied. That went about as well as could be expected for a first meeting. Financial institutions never admit liability immediately, but they're clearly concerned. The fact that you have a banking background gives us leverage. They know you understand exactly how badly their verification procedures failed. I nodded, mentally exhausted from the meeting, but relieved to have made tangible progress. What's next? We wait for their internal investigation, which will almost certainly confirm the forgery. Meanwhile, the police investigation continues. And you? She looked at me carefully. You need to decide what kind of relationship, if any, you want with your son going forward. The question lingered as I viewed apartments that afternoon. The first was too dark, with windows overlooking an air shaft. The second smelled faintly of mildew, suggesting moisture problems. The third, however, had potential. A small but bright one-bedroom on the 3rd floor of a well-maintained building, with a tiny balcony just large enough for a chair and a pot of flowers. It's not fancy, the property manager warned as he showed me the compact kitchen with its dated appliances. But the building's solid, utilities are included, and the neighborhood's safe. It's perfect, I said, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. When can I move in? He checked his clipboard. We'd need first and last month's rent, plus security deposit. Assuming your credit check and references clear, you could have keys by Friday. Friday, just 3 days away. The speed was simultaneously terrifying and exhilarating. Could I really start over at 63, in a modest apartment with dated appliances, after decades in spacious single-family homes? As I wrote the check for the application fee, I realized that for the first time since discovering Gregory and Melissa's betrayal, I was thinking about the future rather than the past, not with resignation or despair, but with a cautious sense of possibility. I returned to the hotel to find a message from Detective Rivera. Progress on your case. Please call when convenient. I called immediately, and he answered on the second ring. Mrs. Ambersham, thanks for getting back to me. We've been investigating the financial records we've obtained so far, and we've found something I think you should know about. What is it? I asked, tension returning to my shoulders. The account that received the large transfer from the fraudulent second mortgage? It's not just in your daughter-in-law's name. It's a joint account with another individual, a man named Julian Reeves. Does that name mean anything to you? I frowned, searching my memory. No, I don't believe so. Who is he? We're still investigating, but preliminary findings suggest he and your daughter-in-law have a personal relationship. There are numerous transactions between them dating back approximately 8 months, including significant cash withdrawals and purchases at jewelry stores, hotels, and high-end restaurants. The implication was clear. You're saying Melissa is having an affair? And using the money stolen from me to finance it? I can't officially confirm the nature of their relationship, Detective Rivera said carefully, but the pattern of transactions is consistent with extramarital activities we've seen in other cases. I sat heavily on the edge of the hotel bed, a strange laugh escaping me. So my son helped steal my life savings to finance a lifestyle that included his wife's affair with another man. It appears that way, yes. I'm sorry, Mrs. Ambersham. I thought you should know, especially as you're considering how to proceed with charges. After we ended the call, I sat motionless for several minutes, absorbing this latest revelation. The betrayal had layers I hadn't even imagined. Did Gregory know about Melissa's affair? Was he an unwitting victim in that aspect of the fraud, even as he participated in stealing from me? My phone rang again. Gregory, for what must have been the 20th time that day. This time I answered. Mom? Thank God. Please, we need to talk. Face to face. I agree, I said calmly. But not at the house. Meet me at Riverside Park, by the marina, tomorrow at noon. The park? Why not just come home? Those are my terms, Gregory. Take them or leave them. He hesitated only briefly. Okay, the marina at noon. I'll be there. I ended the call and began planning what I would say to my son, perhaps for the last time. Riverside Park was unusually quiet for a weekday afternoon. A few elderly couples strolled along the pathways, a mother pushed a toddler on the swings, and a solitary jogger circled the perimeter trail. I arrived 20 minutes early, selecting a bench overlooking the marina where small pleasure boats bobbed gently on the water. In another life, the one I'd planned with Thomas, we might have owned one of those boats, spending leisurely weekends exploring the coastline. Now that future, like so many others, existed only in the realm of what might have been. I straightened my shoulders and smoothed my slacks, habits from decades of professional life that had become ingrained responses to stress. The manila envelope on my lap contained copies of all the documentation I'd provided to the police and my attorney, bank statements, loan documents, transaction records. I hadn't decided yet whether to share the information about Melissa's affair. That revelation felt like a grenade with an unpredictable blast radius. At precisely noon, I spotted Gregory approaching from the parking lot. Even from a distance, the changes in him were evident. His normally immaculate appearance had deteriorated, shirt wrinkled, hair uncombed, dark circles shadowing his eyes. He scanned the park anxiously until his gaze landed on me, and for an instant, relief washed over his features before settling back into a mask of tension. You came alone? I asked as he reached the bench. He nodded, lowering himself beside me with the careful movements of someone much older than his 42 years. Melissa wanted to come, but I told her this needed to be between you and me. A rare instance of good judgment, I observed dryly. He winced but didn't challenge the barb. Mom, I don't even know where to begin. The beginning would be traditional, I suggested, though in this case, I'm not sure when that was. When did you first decide that treating me as your personal ATM was acceptable? His gaze dropped to his hands, which twisted restlessly in his lap. It wasn't like that. Not at first. After I lost my job, everything just spiraled. The mortgage, the car payments, Melissa's expectations, we were drowning. The first few transfers were just to keep us afloat until I found something new. And the next few dozen? The systematic draining of my retirement accounts? The forged power of attorney? The fraudulent second mortgage? Was that all just keeping afloat too? I never forged anything, he protested, his head snapping up. That was all Melissa. I swear, Mom, I didn't know about the second mortgage until you showed me the documents. I studied his face, searching for truth in the features I'd once known better than my own. But you knew about the transfers from my accounts, the ones happening almost daily for months. He couldn't hold my gaze. Yes, he admitted quietly. Those I knew about. And you said nothing, did nothing to stop it. Continued living in a house you couldn't afford, driving cars you couldn't pay for, hosting dinner parties with money stolen from your mother. I told myself it was temporary, he whispered, that I'd pay it all back once I found another job, that you wouldn't miss it. You always said you had more than enough for retirement. The casual entitlement in his justification sparked a flash of anger I didn't try to suppress. That was not your decision to make. That money represented 40 years of work, Gregory. 40 years of careful planning and saving, of weekend shifts and overtime, of declining vacations and luxuries so that I could have security in my later years. I know, he murmured. I know that now. No, I don't think you do. I opened the manila envelope and removed the first document, a spreadsheet detailing every unauthorized withdrawal from my accounts, each one highlighted in accusatory yellow. 312 separate transactions, Gregory. Not a momentary lapse in judgment, not a one-time emergency. A systematic campaign of theft spanning more than half a year. He recoiled as if I'd slapped him. Mom, please. Please what? Please don't use that word. Please pretend it was something other than what it was. Please protect you from the consequences of your own actions. I shook my head. I've spent my entire adult life doing exactly that, and look where it's gotten us both. His eyes welled with tears. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I believe you're sorry you got caught, I replied evenly. I'm less convinced you're sorry for what you did. That's not fair. A flash of the old Gregory surfaced, defensive, quick, to cast himself as the victim. I made mistakes, terrible mistakes, but you're acting like I'm some kind of criminal mastermind who plotted to ruin you. The police seem to think the term criminal applies rather accurately, regardless of the mastermind part. I removed another document from the envelope, the initial police report with financial elder abuse prominently displayed in the classification field. Detective Rivera says the case is quite straightforward from a legal perspective. Gregory paled, his momentary defensiveness evaporating. You really went to the police? Yes. Are they? He swallowed hard. Are they going to arrest me? The investigation is ongoing. Detective Rivera mentioned that charges would likely be filed within the week. He buried his face in his hands. My life is over. The melodrama might have moved me once. Now it only underscored how little he understood about consequences, his or mine. Your life isn't over, Gregory. It's simply changing in ways you don't want due to choices you made. My life, on the other hand, has been fundamentally altered. The security I spent decades building is gone. The relationship I cherished most is broken beyond repair. The future I planned has vanished. He looked up, face streaked with tears. It doesn't have to be that way. We can fix this. I'll get a job. Any job. I'll work 2 jobs if I have to. I'll pay back every penny. Even at 2 jobs, it would take you more than a decade to repay what you've taken, I pointed out. And that's assuming you lived frugally and dedicated most of your income to restitution, neither of which seems likely based on your track record. I can change. I will change. Just give me a chance to prove it. I sighed, suddenly weary of the conversation, of his promises, of the entire situation. You've had chances, Gregory. So many chances. Every time you overspent your allowance as a teenager, every credit card bill I paid off during your college years, every emergency loan during your 20s, every gambling debt I covered, every time I bailed you out, I was giving you another chance to learn financial responsibility, to develop integrity, to become the man I believed you could be. He flinched at the recitation of his financial history, but didn't dispute it. And now, I continued, after you've stolen my retirement savings, forged my signature, and lied to my face repeatedly, you're asking for yet another chance. What choice do I have? What else can I say? Desperation edged his voice. If you go through with this, if I end up with a criminal record, my career is finished. No one will hire me. Melissa will leave. I'll lose everything. I studied him for a long moment. Do you know about Julian Reeves? His blank expression answered my question even before he spoke. Who? The man Melissa has been seeing for at least 8 months. The one she opened a joint account with. The one she's been spending the money from the fraudulent second mortgage on. Gregory's face went through a rapid succession of emotions: confusion, disbelief, anger, devastation. That's not possible. You're making that up to turn me against her. Detective Rivera discovered it during their financial investigation. There are hotel receipts, jewelry purchases, restaurant bills. Quite the lavish affair, apparently. Financed with my money. He shook his head vehemently. No, there must be some mistake. Melissa wouldn't. She couldn't. The same Melissa who forged my signature on a second mortgage? Who suggested I eat in the kitchen while you entertained guests in my dining room? That Melissa? His breathing grew ragged, his eyes wild as he tried and failed to reconcile this new information with whatever narrative he'd constructed about his marriage. I need to talk to her. I need to see these records for myself. I'm sure Detective Rivera would be happy to share the relevant details during your official interview. I returned the documents to the envelope. Gregory, I didn't tell you this to be cruel. I told you because you're still not seeing reality clearly. You're still spinning stories about how everything can go back to normal if I just give you one more chance. So that's it? You're really going through with the charges? You're sending your only son to jail? The blunt question hung between us, heavy with accusation and pleading. I took a deep breath, looking out at the marina where the afternoon sun sparkled on the water. I don't know, I admitted finally. Part of me wants justice, wants you to face real consequences for once in your life. Another part remembers teaching you to ride a bike, bandaging your skinned knees, checking for monsters under your bed. He seized on this hesitation like a drowning man grasping at floating debris. I can make this right, Mom. I swear I can. Just don't press charges. Give me a chance to pay you back, to prove I can change. And how exactly would you do that? You have no job, no savings, and apparently a wife who's been cheating on you while spending money neither of you had any right to. He had no answer, his earlier confidence in his ability to make things right already faltering in the face of practical realities. "I've made a decision," I said after the silence had stretched uncomfortably long. "I'm leaving. I've rented an apartment across town. I move in on Friday." "Leaving?" He looked bewildered, as if the concept of me having an independent life was entirely foreign. "But where will you go? How will you manage?" "I just told you. I've rented an apartment. As for managing, I've been doing that quite successfully. For 63 years, including raising you alone after your father died. I think I'll muddle through somehow." He had the grace to look embarrassed. "I didn't mean it like that. I always pictured you in a house, not an apartment." "Yes, well, financial circumstances have a way of reshaping our pictures of the future." I stood, signaling that our conversation was nearing its end. "I've scheduled a time on Saturday to collect my personal belongings from the house. I'd appreciate it if you made yourself scarce during that time." He rose as well, panic returning to his features. "Wait, you can't just leave like this. What about the charges? What about us?" "I haven't made a final decision about the criminal charges," I said honestly. "As for us, I think that's a question better addressed after a period of separation. We both need time to process what's happened, to determine what, if anything, remains of our relationship." "Mom, please, I need you." His voice cracked, revealing the frightened little boy who had always hidden beneath the entitled man. For a moment, my resolve wavered. The maternal instinct to comfort, to protect, to sacrifice for this person I had brought into the world surged within me. But alongside it rose the clear-eyed wisdom of experience, the recognition that continuing to shield Gregory from consequences wouldn't help him. It would only perpetuate the cycle that had led us to this moment. "What you need," I said gently, "is to face reality, to take responsibility for your actions, to rebuild your life on a foundation of honesty and integrity, rather than debt and deception." "And you won't be there to help me do that?" "No, Gregory, I won't. This is a journey you need to make on your own." I picked up my purse and the manila envelope. "I'll text you the details for Saturday. Please make sure I have unobstructed access to all my belongings." As I walked away, I heard him call after me, his voice small and lost in the open expanse of the park. I didn't turn back. Each step forward felt both terribly painful and oddly liberating, as if I were simultaneously tearing something precious apart and setting it free. By the time I reached my car, my phone was already buzzing with messages from Gregory, pleas, promises, recriminations. I silenced it and drove to the hotel, emotionally drained but strangely peaceful. For the first time in months, perhaps years, I had spoken my truth without filtering it through the lens of maternal protection. I had seen my son clearly, neither demonizing nor excusing him, and had made decisions based on that clarity rather than wishful thinking. The hotel lobby was bustling with a newly arrived tour group, their excited chatter and rolling suitcases creating a chaotic energy that contrasted sharply with my contemplative mood. I navigated through the crowd to the elevator, eager for the solitude of my room. As the door slid open on my floor, I nearly collided with a tall figure stepping out. A distinguished-looking man in his 60s with silver-streaked dark hair and kind eyes that widened in recognition. Harriet Ambersham. I blinked, in surprise. Robert Kimball? It had been at least 15 years since I'd seen Robert, a former colleague from First Citizens Bank. We had worked closely together in the commercial lending department for nearly a decade before he was promoted to a position at the regional headquarters. "It is you." His face lit up with a warm smile. "What are you doing here? Don't tell me you're attending the banking compliance conference too?" I laughed softly, the sound strange to my own ears after days of tension and tears. "No, nothing. So official, I'm just..." Staying here temporarily while I sort out some housing arrangements. His expression shifted to concern. Everything all right? It's a long story, I admitted. Not one for a hotel hallway. I was just heading down for an early dinner before the evening sessions start. Would you care to join me? I'd love to catch up. Under normal circumstances, I might have declined, retreating to the comfort of solitude rather than explaining my complicated situation to an old colleague. But something in Robert's genuine warmth, combined with my emotional exhaustion from the confrontation with Gregory, made the prospect of friendly company unexpectedly appealing. I'd like that, I said. Just let me drop off these documents and freshen up. Shall I meet you in the restaurant in 20 minutes? As I washed my face and reapplied minimal makeup, I found myself wondering what Robert would think of my situation. Would he see me as a victim, a fool who should have known better than to trust her own son with financial matters? Or would he understand the complex emotional dynamics that had allowed the exploitation to occur despite my professional background? The restaurant was moderately crowded when I arrived, but Robert had secured a quiet corner table. He stood as I approached, pulling out my chair with an old-fashioned courtesy that reminded me of Thomas. We exchanged the usual pleasantries while studying menus and ordering, but once the waiter had retreated, Robert leaned forward with genuine interest. So, temporary housing arrangements? That sounds ominous. I hesitated, unsure how much to share, then decided on honesty. I've recently discovered that my son and daughter-in-law have been systematically stealing from me. I've moved out of their house and am in the process of securing my remaining assets while I decide whether to press criminal charges. Robert's eyebrows shot up, but to his credit, he didn't immediately pepper me with questions or express shock at my bluntness. Instead, he nodded thoughtfully. I'm sorry, Harriet. That must be incredibly difficult, especially given your background in banking. That's the irony, isn't it? 40 years helping people manage their finances, spotting fraud, protecting the bank's interests, and I completely missed what was happening in my own accounts. It's different when family is involved, he said gently. The professional filters we apply to strangers don't work the same way with people we love. His understanding, free from judgment, loosened something tight in my chest. Over the next hour, as we ate and shared a bottle of wine, I found myself telling Robert the entire story, from Gregory's job loss to the dinner parties where I was relegated to the kitchen, from the discovery of the unauthorized transfers to my final confrontation. With Gregory in the park, Robert listened attentively, asking occasional clarifying questions, but mostly allowing me to process the narrative in my own way. When I finished, he shook his head slowly. You've been through the ringer, Harriet. How are you really holding up? The simple question, asked with genuine concern rather than perfunctory politeness, nearly undid me. I blinked rapidly, fighting sudden tears. I'm managing, I said finally. One day at a time. I've rented an apartment, contacted the necessary legal and financial entities, created a plan for moving forward. The practical aspects are straightforward enough. And the emotional aspects? I traced the rim of my wine glass, considering. Those are messier. I vacillate between rage and grief, between wanting justice and wanting to protect my son despite everything he's done, between mourning the relationship we had and recognizing that perhaps that relationship existed only in my imagination. That's entirely natural, Robert assured me. You've experienced a profound betrayal from the person you should have been able to trust most. That's not something you process overnight. No, it isn't, I agreed. The hardest part is examining my own role in creating this situation. Not that I blame myself for their actions, I added quickly, but I've been reflecting on the patterns I established over the years, the ways I enabled Gregory's financial irresponsibility long before it escalated to outright theft. Robert nodded. That's an uncomfortably common dynamic between parents and adult children. We want to help, to smooth the path for them, and sometimes we don't recognize when our help becomes harmful. Exactly. I felt a rush of gratitude for his understanding. I've been his safety net for so long that he never developed the skills or mindset to function without one. And now, at 42, he's facing a financial and legal reckoning that might have been avoided if I'd allowed him to experience smaller consequences earlier. Hindsight has perfect vision, Robert said with a rueful smile. But predicting which small indulgences will lead to major problems isn't so easy, especially when you're parenting solo. No, it isn't, I acknowledged. Though in retrospect, the warning signs were there. The pattern was established long before Melissa entered the picture, though she certainly accelerated it. We continued talking as the restaurant gradually emptied around us, moving from the specifics of my situation to broader reflections on parenting, aging, and the unexpected turns life takes in its later chapters. Robert shared that he had been widowed 3 years earlier and was still adjusting to life on his own. The conference circuits help, he admitted. Keeps me busy, gives me a reason to dress properly and engage with the world, rather than rattling around my empty house talking to myself. I can understand that, I said. I'm a bit apprehensive about living alone again after so many years. Even with all the tension and discomfort of the past few months, there were other people in the house. Voices, movement, life. It's an adjustment, he acknowledged. But there are compensations. The freedom to structure your day exactly as you please. The peace of knowing that everything is exactly where you left it. The luxury of eating ice cream straight from the container, at midnight without judgment. I laughed. A genuine laugh that felt like the first in ages. I'll keep that last one in mind. As we finished our coffee, Robert hesitated, then said, I don't mean to overstep, but I'm going to be in town for the next 3 days for this conference. If you'd like company for dinner again, or if you need any practical assistance with your move, I'd be happy to help. The offer was made with such sincerity, without a hint of pity or ulterior motive, that I found myself accepting before I'd fully processed the implications. I'd like that, I said. The dinner part, at least. As for the move, I've hired professional movers for the heavy lifting, but I might take you up on moral support for the emotional aspects of sorting through decades of possessions. Consider it done, he said, signaling for the check. And, Harriet, I hope this isn't inappropriate given everything you're going through, but it's genuinely wonderful to see you again. You were always one of the colleagues I most respected. The unexpected compliment warmed me. The feeling is mutual, Robert. Your insights were always the most thoughtful in our department meetings. We parted in the lobby with plans to meet for dinner the following evening. As I rode the elevator to my floor, I realized that for the first time since discovering Gregory's betrayal, I had spent several hours thinking and talking about something else. The constant weight of anger and hurt had temporarily lifted, allowing me to remember that I was more than just a victim of financial exploitation, more than just Gregory's mother. I was Harriet Ambersham, banker, colleague, friend, a whole person with a life that extended beyond the painful circumstances that had brought me to this hotel. In my room, I found several voicemails from Gregory, each more desperate than the last. I deleted them without listening fully, no longer willing to be manipulated by his emotional intensity. Instead, I called Catherine, my attorney, to update her on my meeting with Gregory and my evolving thoughts on pressing criminal charges. The decision doesn't need to be made immediately, she reminded me. The police investigation will continue gathering evidence regardless. Just know that the longer you wait, the more complex it may become to withdraw the complaint if you ultimately decide to pursue only civil remedies. I understand, I said. I'm still processing everything, including some new information about Melissa's involvement with another man. Catherine sighed. Unfortunately, that's not uncommon in these cases. Financial exploitation often involves multiple layers of deception. After we hung up, I sat on the edge of the bed, considering my options. The apartment I'd rented would be ready in 2 days. I had appointments with movers, had arranged for utilities to be connected, had begun the process of creating a new life independent of Gregory and Melissa. But the question of criminal charges still loomed, a decision that would shape not only Gregory's future but my own as well. Would pressing charges bring me peace, or would it simply extend the pain and conflict into another arena? Would dropping the criminal complaint feel like an appropriate act of maternal mercy, or a final capitulation to Gregory's manipulation? And what did I truly want the outcome to be, beyond the practical recovery of my stolen funds? These questions circled in my mind as I prepared for bed, following the small rituals of my evening routine. Brush teeth, wash face, apply night cream, set alarm. The familiar actions were grounding, a reminder that even amid upheaval, certain constants remained. As I slipped between the hotel sheets, my phone lit up with a text from Robert. Enjoyed our conversation immensely. Looking forward to tomorrow. Sleep well. The simple message brought a small smile to my face. Whatever tomorrow brought, more difficult decisions, confrontations with Gregory or Melissa, the continued unraveling of my carefully planned retirement, at least there would be one bright spot to anticipate. A reminder that connections could be formed even as others were being severed, that life continued to offer unexpected moments of warmth amid the cold reality of betrayal. I closed my eyes, allowing myself to hope, just slightly, that the days ahead might contain more than just the painful dismantling of my past, that perhaps in this unforeseen detour I might discover paths I would never have explored had my original plans remained intact. It wasn't much, just a flicker of optimism in the darkness of recent events. But for tonight, as sleep finally began to claim me, it was enough. Friday morning arrived with unexpected brightness, sunlight streaming through the hotel curtains. I'd forgotten to close fully. I lay still for a moment, orienting myself to the day ahead. Today I would receive the keys to my new apartment, the first home that would be truly mine alone since before Gregory was born. The thought brought a complicated mixture of emotions. Apprehension about this new chapter certainly, a lingering sadness for all that had been lost, but also, surprisingly, a quiet anticipation, a sense of possibility that had been absent from my life for longer than I cared to admit. My dinner with Robert the previous evening had extended well past our planned time frame, our conversation flowing easily from professional reminiscences to personal philosophies, from banking anecdotes to book recommendations. He had offered to accompany me to collect my belongings from Gregory and Melissa's house, a gesture of support I had gratefully accepted. Safety in numbers, he'd said lightly, though we both understood the real value was emotional rather than physical protection. I dressed with particular care, selecting clothing that projected confidence and self-possession. A tailored navy dress, comfortable yet elegant flats, minimal jewelry. Today I would not only be physically moving my possessions, I would be reclaiming my identity, separate from my role as Gregory's mother. The property manager was waiting when I arrived at the apartment building, a ring of keys in his hand and a folder of paperwork tucked under his arm. "Ms. Ambersham, right on time," he greeted me. "Everything's ready for you. The unit's been freshly painted, all appliances tested, locks changed as requested. The extra security measures had cost me a premium, but after recent events, I considered it a necessary investment." The apartment itself was exactly as I remembered from my viewing, compact but well-designed, with large windows that filled the space with natural light. The kitchen was indeed dated, with laminate countertops and older appliances, but impeccably clean. The bedroom could accommodate my queen-sized bed and one dresser, though my larger furniture pieces would need to be stored or sold. "It's perfect," I told the property manager as he handed over the keys. "Just what I need." He seemed mildly surprised by my enthusiasm, perhaps expecting disappointment from someone downsizing so dramatically. But as I stood alone in the empty apartment after he left, I felt a sense of rightness settling over me. This space would become whatever I chose to make it, a reflection of my tastes, my needs, my life. Not a showcase for impressing others or maintaining appearances, but a genuine home tailored to the woman I was now. I spent the next hour measuring spaces and making notes, planning the most efficient arrangement for the limited furniture I would be bringing from Gregory's house. The movers would arrive tomorrow afternoon, following my morning retrieval of personal items. Everything was organized, each step of the transition carefully choreographed to minimize chaos. My phone rang just as I was locking the apartment door. Detective Rivera's name appeared on the screen. "Mrs. Ambersham," he began when I answered. "I wanted to update you on our investigation. We've completed our review of the financial records and have compiled sufficient evidence to recommend charges against both your son and daughter-in-law." Though I had been expecting this, hearing it stated so definitively sent a chill through me. What specifically would they be charged with? For your son, financial elder abuse, theft, and conspiracy to commit fraud. For your daughter-in-law, all of those plus forgery and identity theft related to the second mortgage. The district attorney will make the final determination, but based on the evidence we've gathered, these charges are likely to proceed. I leaned against the wall of the hallway, suddenly needing the support. And if they're convicted, given the amounts involved and the deliberate, systematic nature of the exploitation, they would likely face significant penalties. For your daughter-in-law in particular, with the forgery and identity theft components, there could be prison time involved. Prison. The word hung in the air, heavy with finality. Melissa in prison. Gregory potentially joining her. My son, the little boy I had raised, taught to ride a bicycle, helped with homework, nursed through childhood illnesses, behind bars. "Mrs. Ambersham, are you still there?" Detective Rivera's voice brought me back to the present. "Yes, I'm here, just processing. I understand this is difficult. Many victims in your situation struggle with the reality of pressing charges against family members. However, I want to emphasize that what they did was not a momentary lapse in judgment or a misunderstanding. The evidence shows a calculated, prolonged campaign of financial exploitation targeting you specifically because of your vulnerability as a parent." His bluntness was clarifying in its way. He was right. This wasn't a single mistake or a misunderstanding. It was a deliberate pattern of deception and theft, executed over months by the people who should have been most protective of me. "When would arrests be made?" I asked, my voice steadier than I expected. "We're preparing the paperwork now. Barring any unexpected developments, we would likely execute the arrests early next week." Early next week. A timeline that suddenly made everything more real, more immediate. "Is there anything else I need to do at this point?" I asked. "Not at the moment. If the district attorney has any questions about your statement or the documentation you've provided, they'll contact you directly. Otherwise, you'll be notified before any arrests are made." After we ended the call, I stood motionless in the hallway, my new apartment keys clutched in one hand, my phone in the other. The contrast wasn't lost on me. Symbols of my new beginning, alongside the instrument that had just confirmed the legal destruction of my son's life as he knew it. Was I really going to let this happen? Could I live with myself if Gregory went to prison because of my testimony? Could I live with myself if I enabled him to escape consequences yet again? The questions circled as I drove back to the hotel, a migraine beginning to pulse at my temples. I needed advice from someone who wasn't directly involved, someone who could see the situation clearly without being blinded by either professional obligations or emotional entanglements. Robert was waiting in the hotel lobby when I arrived, his conference badge still hanging around his neck. We had planned to have lunch before his afternoon sessions began. "Harriet? What's wrong?" he asked as soon as he saw my face. "The police are moving forward with charges," I said, sinking into a lobby chair. Arrests could happen as early as next week. He sat beside me, concern evident in his expression. And you're having second thoughts? I don't know what I'm having, I admitted. Part of me believes Gregory and Melissa deserve whatever penalties the law prescribes. They knew exactly what they were doing. They exploited my trust deliberately and repeatedly. But another part of me keeps seeing Gregory as a child, remembering all the hopes I had for him, wondering where I went wrong as a parent. Robert nodded thoughtfully. It's not an either-or situation, you know. You can recognize that they deserve consequences while still feeling conflicted about being the one to initiate those consequences. But it is either-or in practical terms, I pointed out. Either I continue with the criminal complaint, in which case they likely face severe penalties, or I withdraw it, in which case they essentially get away with stealing my life savings. Are those really the only options? What about the civil case your attorney mentioned? I sighed. Catherine believes we have a strong civil case, but collecting any judgment would be difficult. They have no liquid assets, massive debt, and Gregory's employment prospects are questionable even without a criminal record. I might win on paper, but never see a dime. And more importantly, Robert suggested gently, a civil judgment wouldn't provide the sense of justice, of consequences, that you're seeking. Exactly. I was grateful for his perceptiveness. It's not primarily about recovering the money, though that matters. It's about there being real consequences for what they did. About breaking this lifelong pattern where Gregory does something terrible and I clean up the mess, shielding him from the fallout. That's understandable. But Harriet, whatever you decide about the criminal charges, you've already broken that pattern in the most important way. You've removed yourself from the situation. You've refused to continue enabling his behavior. You're establishing boundaries and independence regardless of the legal outcome. His perspective was clarifying, helping me separate the various threads of my conflict. The practical question of recovering funds, the emotional need for justice, and the deeper issue of redefining my relationship with Gregory. Thank you, I said sincerely. That helps me see things more clearly. We moved to the hotel restaurant for lunch, our conversation shifting to more immediate practical matters. My apartment setup, the logistics of tomorrow's move, the items I most wanted to retrieve from Gregory's house. I made a detailed list, I explained, showing him the notepad where I'd mapped out the house by room, with specific items identified in each. I want to be efficient, in and out as quickly as possible. Smart approach, he approved. Minimizes both confrontation time and the risk of forgetting important items in the emotional stress of the moment. After lunch, Robert returned to his conference sessions, and I spent the afternoon purchasing essentials for the new apartment: shower curtain, bath mat, cleaning supplies, basic pantry staples. The mundane shopping was oddly therapeutic, anchoring me in ordinary life while much larger questions remained unresolved. That evening, against my better judgment, I listened to the latest voicemail from Gregory. His voice was ragged, desperate. "Mom, please call me back. Melissa's left. She took her clothes, her jewelry, emptied our joint account. She's not answering my calls. I don't know what to do. I need your help, please." So Melissa had fled, likely spooked by the police investigation and my revelation about her affair with Julian Reeves. I wasn't surprised. She had always struck me as the type to abandon a sinking ship, taking whatever valuables she could carry. I didn't call Gregory back. There was nothing I could offer him now, no financial rescue, no advice that wouldn't sound hollow given our current circumstances, no comfort that wouldn't implicitly excuse his actions. Instead, I texted him a brief factual message. "We'll be at the house tomorrow at 9 a.m. to collect my personal belongings. Please ensure I have full access." His response came immediately. "I'll be here. We need to talk." I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say that would change the fundamental reality of our situation. The time for talks, for explanations, and justifications had passed. Now we were simply executing the logistical details of a relationship's dissolution. Sleep eluded me that night, my mind cycling through memories of Gregory's childhood, searching for moments when I might have intervened differently, when I might have guided him toward becoming a different kind of man. The little boy who had thrown tantrums when denied a toy at the store. The teenager who had manipulated his way out of consequences for damaged property. The young adult who had maxed out his first credit card within weeks of receiving it, expecting me to cover the balance. Had there been a critical juncture where different parenting might have changed his trajectory? Or had I been naive to believe that my love and sacrifice could overcome whatever inherent character flaws had led him to this point? Morning arrived with no answers, only the practical necessity of facing the day ahead. I dressed in comfortable clothes suitable for packing and moving, applied minimal makeup, and met Robert in the hotel lobby at 8:30. "Ready?" he asked simply. "As I'll ever be," I replied. We drove separately to Gregory's house, my former house, arriving precisely at 9 a.m. I sat in my car for a moment, steeling myself for what lay ahead. The property looked different somehow, though nothing had physically changed. The manicured lawn, the ornamental plantings, the imposing facade, all remained as they had been, yet they now felt like elements of a stage set rather than components of a home. Robert parked behind me and approached my car, offering a reassuring smile. "I'll follow your lead," he said. "Just let me know what you need." Gregory opened the door before we reached it. He looked terrible, unshaven, hollow-eyed, wearing the same rumpled shirt I'd seen him in at the park. The house behind him appeared to be in similar disarray, with items strewn across the entryway floor and a trash bag leaning against the wall. "Mom," he said, his voice hoarse. When he noticed Robert, confusion crossed his features. "Who's this?" "Robert Kimball, an old colleague," I said briskly, stepping past Gregory into the house. "He's helping me today." Gregory looked as if he wanted to object to Robert's presence, but apparently thought better of it. "Melissa's gone," he said instead, following me into the living room. "She took everything valuable. The jewelry you gave her for our wedding, the silver from your family, the antique watch collection Dad left me." I nodded, unsurprised. "That's unfortunate," I said neutrally, "but not relevant to why I'm here today. I've come for my personal belongings, as arranged. Mom, please, I'm falling apart here. Everything's collapsing. The bank called about the mortgage. We're 3 months behind. The police left a card, said they need to speak with me urgently. Melissa's attorney sent divorce papers. I need your help." The litany of crises might once have activated my maternal rescue instinct, sending me into problem-solving mode regardless of how Gregory's behavior had contributed to each situation. Now, I simply felt a detached sort of pity, tinged with the recognition that this moment had been inevitable given the path he had chosen. "I can't help you with any of that, Gregory," I said firmly. "I'm here only to collect my belongings. I've allocated 2 hours for this task, and I intend to stick to that timeline." His face crumpled. "You're really going through with it, aren't you? Pressing charges, letting them arrest your own son." "The police investigation is proceeding based on the evidence," I said carefully. "What happens next is largely out of my hands." "That's bull," he spat, a flash of the old entitlement, breaking through his desperation. "One word from you and they'd drop it. You know they would." "Perhaps," I acknowledged. "But I haven't spoken that word, have I?" We stared at each other across the living room, the space where I had once read him bedtime stories, where we had decorated Christmas trees together, where I had comforted him through his first heartbreak. Those memories seemed to belong to different people now, characters in a story that had concluded long ago. "I'll start with my bedroom," I said, turning away from his accusing gaze. "Robert, Would you mind bringing in the packing supplies from my car? The next 2 hours passed in a blur of efficient activity. I moved methodically through the house, collecting clothing, personal documents, family photographs, and sentimental items. Robert helped pack and carry, maintaining a respectful distance when Gregory and I interacted, but providing a steadying presence throughout. Gregory alternated between sullen silence and desperate attempts to engage me in conversation about his current predicament. I responded with brief, neutral acknowledgments, refusing to be drawn into a discussion that could only cycle through the same territory we had covered at the park. In what had once been my home office, now converted to a storage room, I found boxes of family memorabilia that I had feared might have been discarded, photo albums from my childhood, my parents' wedding album, letters my father had written to my mother during his military service. "You kept these," I said, surprised to find them intact. Gregory, hovering in the doorway, shrugged. Melissa wanted to throw them out, said they were just taking up space. I told her they were important to you. A small kindness amid the greater betrayal. I added the boxes to my collection without comment. In the master bedroom, I found my mother's jewelry box hidden at the back of a closet shelf. Opening it with trepidation, I was relieved to discover that most pieces remained. The pearl necklace my father had given my mother on their 25th anniversary, the sapphire earrings that had been a gift for my 16th birthday, the simple gold wedding band Thomas had placed on my finger 40 years earlier. "Did Melissa know about these?" I asked Gregory, who had followed me silently from room to room. He shook his head. "I never showed her. I kept them separate from the rest of the jewelry, another small act of protection, insufficient to balance the greater harm, but noteworthy nonetheless." I closed the jewelry box carefully and added it to the growing collection of items to be transported to my new apartment. By 11 a.m., we had nearly finished. Robert was loading the final boxes into our cars while I did a last sweep of the house, checking for overlooked items. In the living room, I paused before the family photo that still hung above the fireplace. The three of us, Gregory, Thomas, and me, taken during a beach vacation when Gregory was about 12. Sun-bronzed and smiling, we looked like the perfect family, untouched by the financial struggles, health crises, and betrayals that lay ahead. "Do you want that?" Gregory asked quietly, having appeared in the doorway without my noticing. I considered the question seriously. Did I want this artifact of a happier time? This reminder of what our family had once been, or at least appeared to be? "No," I decided finally. "You keep it." He nodded, his eyes fixed on the photo. "We were happy then, weren't we? It wasn't all bad. There were good times." "Yes," I acknowledged. "There were good times." "Could we ever—" He hesitated, voice cracking. "Could we ever find our way back to something better? Not like before, I know that's impossible, but something? Some kind of relationship?" The question hung between us, weighted with decades of complex history. I studied his face, the features so familiar to me, the expressions I had learned to read from his earliest infancy. Despite everything, this was still my son. The baby I had nursed, the child I had raised, the man who had disappointed me so profoundly. "I don't know," I said honestly. "Right now, I need distance. I need to rebuild my life without you in it. Maybe someday, after all the legal matters are resolved, after you've taken genuine responsibility for your actions and made real changes, maybe then we could consider what kind of relationship might be possible." "But that could be years," he protested. "If I go to prison—" "Yes," I interrupted gently. "It could be years. That's the reality we're facing, Gregory. Actions have consequences, and some consequences can't be undone or shortcut, no matter how much we might wish otherwise." He looked away, blinking rapidly. "I never meant for it to go this far. It started so small, just a little help here and there, and then it spiraled, and before I knew it—" "I know," I said. though I didn't entirely believe his version of events. But intent doesn't erase impact. You didn't mean to steal my retirement? Savings, perhaps. But you did it nonetheless. One transaction at a time over many months. And now we both have to live with the consequences of those actions. Robert appeared in the doorway, tactfully clearing his throat. Everything's loaded, Harriet. Whenever you're ready. I nodded gratefully, then turned back to Gregory. I need to go now. Will you at least let me know what happens? With the police? The charges? Detective Rivera will contact you directly, I said. But yes, if there are developments you should know about, I'll communicate them. He stepped forward suddenly, arms outstretched as if to embrace me, then stopped, reading the subtle withdrawal in my posture. His hands dropped to his sides. I'm sorry, Mom, he whispered. I'm so sorry for all of it. I believe you are, I said softly. Goodbye, Gregory. Walking away from that house, from my son, was one of the hardest things I had ever done. Each step felt weighted, as if I were moving against a powerful current. But I continued forward, one foot in front of the other, until I reached my car where Robert waited. Okay? He asked simply. I nodded, not trusting my voice. He squeezed my shoulder briefly, then returned to his own vehicle. We drove in convoy to my new apartment where the moving company was scheduled to arrive within the hour. The rest of the day passed in a blur of practical activities, directing movers, unpacking essentials, arranging furniture in the compact space. Robert stayed throughout, offering both physical assistance and quiet moral support. By evening, the apartment had transformed from an empty shell into the beginnings of a home. My bed was assembled, basic kitchenware unpacked, bathroom essentials arranged. It's really coming together, Robert observed as we collapsed onto my sofa, one of the few larger pieces I had brought from the old house. How does it feel? Surreal, I admitted, like I'm living someone else's life, but also right, somehow, like I'm finally being honest about who I am and what I need, rather than organizing my existence around someone else's demands. He nodded understandingly. That's a profound shift. It takes time to fully inhabit that new reality. I keep waiting for the regret to hit, I confessed. For that moment when I question everything, when I wonder if I've made a terrible mistake by pursuing the charges, by cutting ties with Gregory, by starting over at 63. And has it? Not yet. There's sadness, certainly. Grief for what might have been, for the relationship I thought we had, but not regret for the decisions I've made since discovering the truth. Those are different emotions, he agreed, though many people conflate them. We ordered takeout for dinner, eating directly from containers as we sat on the floor of my new living room, my dining table not yet assembled. The casualness of the meal, the absence of pretense or performance, felt liberating after months. In Gregory and Melissa's showcase home, where every meal was an exercise in maintaining appearances. As Robert prepared to leave, he hesitated at the door. I know this is probably premature, given everything you're processing, but my conference ends tomorrow. I'll be heading back to Westlake on Sunday. I'd like to stay in touch if that's something you'd be open to. The request was made with such careful respect for my current circumstances that I found myself smiling. I'd like that very much, Robert. In fact, I was dreading saying goodbye so soon after reconnecting. Relief flickered across his features. Excellent. Perhaps we could have dinner next weekend. I know a fantastic Italian place in Westlake, only about an hour's drive from here. That sounds lovely, I agreed. A nice incentive to get through the first week in my new place. After he left, I continued unpacking, finding places for treasured possessions in my downsized space. Each item I positioned, the framed photograph of my parents on their wedding day, the small watercolor Thomas had painted on our honeymoon, The crystal vase Gregory had given me for Mother's Day when he was 9 represented a connection to my past that I was choosing to carry forward into this new chapter. The doorbell rang just as I was arranging books on the small shelf in the living room. Checking the peephole, I was surprised to see Detective Rivera standing in the hallway. "Mrs. Ambersham," he greeted me when I opened the door. "I apologize for the late visit, but there have been developments in your case that I thought you should know about immediately." I invited him in, offering him the only chair while I perched on the edge of the sofa, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes. "What's happened?" I asked, anxiety tightening my chest. "We arrested your daughter-in-law this afternoon," he said without preamble. "She was attempting to board a flight to the Cayman Islands with approximately $120,000 in cash and jewelry." "The Caymans," I repeated, unsurprised by Melissa's choice of a non-extradition country. "And the money and jewelry?" "Based on the descriptions you provided in your initial report, much of it appears to be property taken from your home. The cash likely represents proceeds from the fraudulent activities, possibly liquidated assets purchased with the stolen funds." I nodded, processing this information. "And Gregory? Have you arrested him as well?" Detective Rivera shook his head. "Not yet. Given that your daughter-in-law was clearly attempting to flee the jurisdiction, we accelerated her arrest. Your son remains under investigation, but the district attorney is now considering the possibility that he may have been less directly involved in certain aspects of the fraud than initially believed." "You mean the forgery and identity theft," I clarified. "Precisely. While he clearly participated in and benefited from the financial exploitation, the evidence suggests that the more sophisticated elements of the fraud, the forged documents, the second mortgage, the creation of hidden accounts, were primarily your daughter-in-law's doing." This aligned with my own suspicions. Gregory had never possessed either the attention to detail or the financial sophistication required for such elaborate schemes. His participation had likely been more opportunistic than strategic, taking advantage of funds Melissa made available, without questioning their source too closely. "What does this mean for the charges against him?" I asked. "That's partly why I'm here," Detective Rivera said, leaning forward slightly. "The district attorney is considering offering your son a plea agreement contingent on his full cooperation in the case against your daughter-in-law. He would still face penalties for his role in the financial exploitation, but they would be significantly reduced compared to what he might receive if the case went to trial." "And he would avoid prison time?" "Potentially, yes. Probation, restitution, community service. These would be more likely outcomes under a plea agreement." I absorbed this information, surprised by the wave of relief that washed over me. As angry as I remained about Gregory's betrayal, the thought of him in prison had never sat easily with me. "What do you need from me?" I asked. "Nothing official." At this point, Detective Rivera assured me, the investigation and prosecution will proceed based on the evidence. However, I wanted you to be aware of these developments, particularly since your son may contact you once he learns of his wife's arrest. "Thank you," I said sincerely. "I appreciate the consideration." After Detective Rivera left, I sat motionless among my boxes, contemplating this latest turn of events. Melissa arrested while attempting to flee the country. Gregory potentially facing reduced charges. The legal machinery now fully in motion, proceeding with a momentum beyond my individual control. My phone rang, predictably displaying Gregory's number. I answered, prepared for either desperate pleas or angry accusations. "They've arrested Melissa," he said without greeting, his voice hollow with shock. "She was trying to leave the country. With cash and jewelry she stole from us." I noted the us, but didn't correct it. "Detective Rivera just left my apartment. He told me." "Did you know? Did you know they were going to arrest her today?" "No," I said truthfully. "I had no advance knowledge." Silence stretched between us, broken only by his ragged breathing. Then, What happens now? That depends partly on you, I said carefully. Detective Rivera mentioned the possibility of a plea agreement if you cooperate fully in the case. Against Melissa. They want me to testify against my own wife, he said, a bitter laugh escaping him. She steals from us, empties our accounts, files for divorce, tries to flee the country, and still I'm expected to feel conflicted about testifying against her. The decision is yours, I said neutrally. But Gregory, this may be your best opportunity to minimize the consequences you're facing. I would strongly encourage you to consult with an attorney immediately. I can't afford an attorney, he said dully. I can barely afford groceries. Everything's frozen or emptied or maxed out. I hesitated, weighing my next words carefully. I can refer you to someone, I offered finally. A colleague of Catherine's who specializes in these matters. I won't pay for the representation, but I can make the introduction. It wasn't much. Nowhere near the rescues I had performed in the past, the times I had swooped in to solve his problems regardless of cost. But it was something. A small bridge extended across the chasm that had opened between us. Thank you, he said quietly, seeming to understand the significance of this limited but genuine offer of help. I would appreciate that. I'll text you the information tomorrow, I promised. In the meantime, don't speak to anyone about the case. Not the police, not Melissa's attorney, no one. Wait until you have proper legal representation. After we hung up, I resumed my unpacking, moving, with renewed purpose through the small apartment. Tomorrow, I would make the attorney referral for Gregory, my final act of maternal guidance before stepping back to allow him to navigate the consequences of his actions as an adult. I would continue setting up my new home, perhaps begin exploring my new neighborhood. And next weekend, I would drive to Westlake for dinner with Robert, the first social engagement of my reclaimed life. The path ahead remained uncertain in many ways. The legal proceedings would likely stretch on for months. My financial situation, while stable, was far more constrained than I had planned for my retirement years. My relationship with Gregory would require careful renegotiation if it could be salvaged at all. Yet, as I arranged the last of my treasured possessions and prepared for my first night in the new apartment, I felt an unexpected sense of peace. I had survived the worst betrayal imaginable, theft and exploitation by my own child. I had taken decisive action to protect myself, to hold the perpetrators accountable, to create boundaries that should have been established decades earlier. And in doing so, I had discovered a resilience I hadn't known I possessed. A capacity to stand alone, to prioritize my own well-being, to envision a future not defined by maternal sacrifice or obligation. It wasn't the retirement I had planned. It wasn't the relationship with my son that I had spent a lifetime trying to build. It wasn't the comfortable financial security I had worked so hard to create. But it was mine. This small apartment with its dated appliances and abundant natural light. This new beginning at 63. This reclaimed identity as Harriet Ambersham. Woman, banker, survivor, not just Gregory's mother or Thomas's widow, but a complete person in my own right. As I settled into my bed, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of my new building, I realized that my earlier fear hadn't materialized. I didn't feel alone or abandoned in this space. Instead, I felt liberated, free from the weight of enabling, from the exhaustion of making excuses, from the bone-deep dread of waiting for the next financial crisis. That liberation had come at a terrible cost, one I would never have willingly paid. Yet having paid it, I was determined to honor the sacrifice by living fully and authentically in whatever time remained to me. New chapter? I whispered into the darkness, a promise to myself as much as an acknowledgement of my circumstances. New beginning. And for the first time since discovering Gregory's betrayal, I slept without dreaming of what had been lost, focusing instead on what might yet be found. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.